Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, let me work out where to put this. There we go. Hopefully that will do it. Welcome into my craft room this Friday. I apologise for the slightly late start. It was me this time. I set everything up and then I don't know which button I pressed, but it all disappeared. So I had to set it all up again. But never mind, we're here now. So I'm just going to see if it looks like I'm live on my iPad. Let's hope it does. And I'm hoping that some of you will be joining me. Looks like I'm live. Hooray. Good, 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 good. Okay, let me put that where I can see the comments. Okay, so no comments yet. So hopefully when somebody joins, they will be able to tell me if they can see and hear me okay. I've got this kind of high-necked fleece on today because it's still not very warm. So I'm hoping my microphone is picking things up all right. If it's not, let me know and I will fiddle around with the placement. Yes, so fingers crossed that that will work okay. It isn't as cold as it was, thank goodness, but it's still not what I would call warm. And I know it's only January. I really hate January. I think I was designed to be whisked away to the sunshine somewhere for January and most of February. And then I'll come back when all the buds are up on the daffodils and the snowdrops are nearly over and I can believe that spring is actually going to come. I don't do very well with dark mornings and dark evenings and cold and damp. Don't like it at all. Mary, hello, welcome. Oh, you're saying it's all good, fantastic. So hopefully the collar on my fleece is not muffling the sound. That's good to know, thank you very much. So let me catch you up with the news. So what news have I got? I've been busy designing all week for classes, which I've really enjoyed. I often do a day here or there and there, but it's been pretty much the whole week. So that has been really nice. I've kind of been in the zone designing away, which has been a lot of fun. I'm just trying to think if there is anything else happening in my kind of personal life to share with you. The decorator's finished. So the spare room and bathroom and our hallway are looking really, really nice. I've just got to get all the stuff out of the lounge and back into the spare room now. So that always seems to take far longer than it ought to, but it is looking really, really nice. We've got some electrical work being done next week and then fingers crossed that's it, at least for the time being, on the house. So yes, some things that I've needed doing for a really long time. It's very nice to finally get them done. As far as Stampin' Up world is concerned, well, we're about halfway through Celebration now. I haven't actually counted up the days. It's probably pretty much the exact middle, I would think, because February is a shorter month than January, isn't it? So we have till the end of February for Celebration. 3 ways to get free products. You can shop big, or you can join. So shopping, if you spend £45, you can choose a free item from the special Celebration brochure. If you spend multiples of £45, then there are some bigger ticket items you can choose from, or you can just choose multiples of the £45 spend items to receive for free. By far and away, the favourite item with my customers has been the Dainty Flowers patterned paper, and quite a lot of people have bought the bundle of stamps and dies from the spring catalogue and then got the paper that coordinates for free, which sounds like a pretty good idea to me. So I know that's been the most popular with my customers. Probably the second most popular thing has been the I think it's called In the Country stamp set. And that's actually what I'm going to be using here next week. I'm going to show you some ideas with that while you've still got time to earn it for free. So that's, I think, been the second most popular item. In terms of classes, I've got my February class deadlines are all gone now, but if you would like to book for March classes, you are very welcome to. I actually had a waiting list for the February card class, the monthly card class. So if you know you want to do that and you want to get your booking in sooner rather than later, I'm always very happy to have them. But I'm taking bookings now for the March card class and the March Fancy Fold cards class, which is a bit of a mouthful. All right, I think that is everything I need to tell you really about the Stampin' Up world. So today's demonstrations are going to be all using the Picturesque stamp set. Now I loved this on site when I saw it in the new mini catalogue. I have a feeling that people are going to look at it and not be quite sure how it works or what to do with it. So I thought it might be a good set to have a play with today. And I've also got a printout of something to show you kind of what it reminds me of, which might help you with some inspiration as well. So without more ado, I'm going to turn the camera down to my desk. Bear with me while I fiddle around just a little bit. I'll cover you over. So hopefully you aren't too affected by all the moving around of everything. I hope I'll get this right first time. And every week I don't. Some weeks I'm more accurate than others in my placement. Let's bring that in a little bit, and I need to find the clip for my cable. Can't reach it. I had the washi tape to hand, but I didn't have the cable to hand. Okay, let's tilt that out just a little bit. I don't want you to get my lap because you don't really need to see that, but you do want to see more of my desk, I think. There we go. Not too bad. Right, let's just get rid of this microphone lead. And we might be there. Well, that's not too bad. Do I get a gold star for this week? I think that's a great improvement. Okay, just hook up this cable. Oops. I'm not going to get a gold star for hooking up the cable. That's just all come unravelled. Let's try again. I think that might do it. Okay, so this is page 64 in the mini catalogue. This is the stamp set I'm talking about, and they do give you a few samples here. It's a set which has got images and words. The words are a little bit different to the ones that you normally get. We've got Love Knows No Boundaries and Difficult Roads Bring You to Beautiful Destinations and Press On. So kind of encouraging words for those times when life can be a bit tricky. Then we've also got Just Because, which is ever so useful, and Hello, if you just want to send somebody a card. And those two words in particular you can use with anything else you've got on your shelf. Any other stamp sets will be great to use with those. Then the images, we've got, I don't even know how to describe them. They're like sections of scenery that you kind of jigsaw puzzle together. We've got a couple of birds, that's always handy. This little one here could be clouds or it could be bushes, and then these three here. It's a photopolymer stamp set, which does make placement a lot easier than it might be. But I'm actually going to use my Stamparatus today because that makes the placement easiest of all, particularly if you want to do more than one card at a time, but even if you don't. So let me move the catalogue out of the way. I'm going to bring in the stamp box because I also want to show you this. This is just a printout of one of those travel adverts. I don't think this is an original vintage one, but they were, was it the 1940s? I'm not really sure. But there is a particular style of poster that arrived in this country. We used them for things like the Great Western Railway or Skegness and seaside resorts, and there are lots of American ones as well. I just picked this one because I thought with the trees and the water it was particularly good to show you what I mean about the stamp set. So this stamp set reminds me of this style of poster where you've got big shapes with no shading on them. They're just in one colour and they kind of jigsaw into each other. So that's how I see this stamp set, and if you're familiar with this style of travel poster, then I'm hoping that will help you envisage how you might use this, the kinds of colours you might use, and so on. Now this particular one has got a bit more detail in the mountains, but they're still not shaded, they're still blocks of colour, albeit fancy shapes to indicate shading or give the feel of shading. But if you look at the trees here, we've got this dark bit here with the kind of the cutouts where the mid-green fits in. Well, that's exactly like we have here with this kind of cutout bit for the next section to fit into. And then we have this section here, which again fits into some more cutouts, just like this section here does. So I'm hoping that helps you see. If it doesn't help you, then don't worry about it. But that was what I kept in mind as I was using this stamp set. So I'm going to bring in my Stamparatus. And I've already set this up so that I can get on with the crafting, but at the end I will show you how to actually set it up, because if you haven't got one of these, you've been thinking about getting one, or indeed if you have got one and you haven't used it for a little while, then it can be really helpful to see how it's set up, and this particular stamp set lends itself to this. You don't have to have the Stamparatus to use the stamp set at all, because they're photopolymer, so you can just look straight down for your placement. But this one, this little tool does make it a lot easier. So I have my foam mat in here because I'm using photopolymer stamps, and I have a piece of the mini grid paper which fits in here perfectly. And I really like it because I've got lines on here, and you'll see I've ruled a pink line down here. That's to help me with my placement of card for something in a minute. So I know if I butt my card up against that pink line, everything's going to be in the right place. I've got two of the magnets here. I did break the golden rule. Did you spot? I put them too close together on the table and they kind of jumped together. These magnets are immensely strong, and if you put them on the table, they will pull together. They're attracted to each other, and if they're very far away from each other and they come at each other at speed, they can actually shatter. So I should keep them on my tool itself. This has got a magnetic base, so the magnets are quite safe there. They'll hold down my grid paper. Okay, so Kay is here. Hi Kay. Kay says she's a little bit late today. Don't worry, Kay. I was a little bit late too. I pressed the wrong button and everything disappeared off my phone, and I had to set it all up again. So you'll be absolutely fine. All right, so I'm going to build up a scene using these stamps. I'll give you the measurements in just a minute. Let me just try and find my pieces of card for this. Don't seem to have a piece of card in here to actually work on. That's not very helpful, is it? I might have to just run and get one. No, not helpful. Right, bear with me. I'm just going to run and get a piece of card. It's just the other side of the room. There we go. I've got some little packs of card here. All right, so my stamp layer needs to be just a little bit smaller than this. I've just grabbed my pack of pre-cut layers because I so often use layers the same size. I have some pre-cut, but this one's just a little bit too big. As I say, I'll give you the measurements in a minute. So my stamps layer is going to be 3¼ inches by 5¼ inches. So I'm just checking that. That looks right. And because I've pre-set up my Stamparatus, I'm going to line this up at the top and have the right hand edge on that line there. And I can use one of the magnets just to hold everything in place. Actually, I'll hold it up the top. Just move those cellophane bags out of the way. All right, so I have got 4 different stamps on here from the set. So the images I'm using are this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So really all the scenic parts. And I'm going to add some birds, but I'm going to stamp those by hand. So I'm going to start off using Starry Sky ink with this image here, which is kind of the base image. A rookie error. Let's just peel that off. I put a piece of acetate on there just to stop the 2 layers of stamps sticking together while I had it sitting on my table waiting to start this. Okay, and I'm going to pop something under that just to keep the plate a little bit more horizontal. There we are. Now these are really solid stamps. I'm giving them a good ink up. It doesn't matter if I get ink on the plate because that's not going to transfer. And then I'm going to stamp that just as if it was on a clear block. Ooh, and look, I've got another piece of acetate there. I was determined these weren't going to glue themselves together. There we go. There we are. And it's a little bit patchy because actually these stamps take up quite a lot of ink, or maybe my ink pad needs re-inking. That's probably nearer the truth. But because I'm using the Stamparatus, I can just re-ink that stamp and put it down, and it will go down in exactly the same place. My card has moved slightly, so I'm going to just check that position. There we go. And if you're coming in late, I will show you how I set up the stamps at the end. There we are, and I've got a really intense dark purpley blue for those trees. So now I'm going to use the next stamp. I'm going to turn the plate round because I've got my stamp on the other side here. And that one is, there we go, just lock it in place. That one is going to be in, not Fresh Freesia at all, in Orchid Oasis. There we go, just a little bit paler. So I've picked my colours for this card from the in colours, from both sets, because I'm going to bring in Fresh Freesia in a minute. So I'm going to pop this one over the top, and I can see that I'm going to put it down a second time and re-ink it again just to get some really intense colour on here. And this really looks like nothing at all when you start. You just have to have faith that it will build up into a really interesting scenic picture as you work. All right, so I'm now going to use my other plate here. So I'm going to use this image next. So you've got this bunch of kind of trees or vegetation in the foreground, and then you've got two little parts. It's all on one stamp. And I'm going to ink that up using Fresh Freesia. I'll try and get it so you can see it. Actually, I'm just going to lift that plate off and move it to the side. Then I think I can get more of this on a little bit more easily. So I've got my Fresh Freesia ink. If I had these on blocks, I would just be picking up my block with my stamp on it and stamping in the usual way. Nothing would change there from the norm. So this is going to fill in that space there. And once again, I'm going to check my placement. I'm going to ink that stamp up a second time, get some really intense colour. There we are. Make sure it's in the right place. Oops. And then I'm going to use the final stamp, which is on the other side of my plate. So I've just turned the plate around, and that's this one here, at least the final one on the Stamparatus. And I'm going to use Tahitian Tide for that. Going to be in the horizon there, and actually I don't know if you can see, let me lift it up and see if I can show you. I've actually missed a bit there. There's a little bit, I can see there's ink on the stamp, but I just didn't press the plate down well enough there, and because it's on the Stamparatus, as long as my card is lined up where it should be, I can press down, and now that ink has stamped on there beautifully. Okay, so I'm now going to take the card out of here and finish it off with some hand stamping. I need my foam mat underneath because these are photopolymer stamps. And I've got those birds there, and I want my Starry Sky ink pad. if you're watching this live, I'd be interested to know if you've got these stamps or if you've noticed them in the catalogue, and if you had noticed them, what did you think of them? So that is my finished scene, which still looks slightly odd, but bear with me, because when I complete the card it's going to make more sense. So I've got a Starry Sky card base, I've got a couple of frames here which I cut. I've got so much on my desk out of sight you wouldn't believe it. There we go, I've just unearthed these. These are the stitched rectangles dies. So I cut two pieces with apertures, and I will give you the details on all those sizes in a minute, because I think once you know how the card goes together it will make a bit more sense in terms of what I'm actually doing. Alright, so the first thing to do is to put this behind my smallest frame. There we go, like that. So I can play around with how much of everything I want in there, and I can see I need to trim a little bit off the top. So let me just mark how much of that I want to trim off. So I want it to fit inside the frame at the bottom. I don't want it to end up with not enough to overlap the frame. And then I'm just going to have a look and see where my aperture is. So if I trim it about here, then it will fit just fine. Now if I wanted to make half a dozen of these cards, say, I would just get on and carry on stamping, because I've got my Stamparatus all set up. I've just got to put the right colour ink on the right stamp and keep going. Or of course I can change colours, clean my stamps off. I'll show you how I do that in a moment, and then just change colour. So I'm going to pop some glue around the aperture. There we are. Now somehow putting that frame on there makes that look like a landscape, where for some reason it didn't look nearly so much like a landscape before. And then my second frame is bigger, so this Tahitian tide, the turquoise, is working as a kind of an inner mat, if you like. So I'm going to put glue around the aperture on this frame. And of course I've gone with fantasy colours. You know, if I look out of my window I don't see purple rivers and pink trees or anything like that. But I was going with this same idea of these kind of vintage travel posters, which they use almost realistic colours but not quite. And I don't know, there's something about them that I just love. Right, so I have my Starry Sky card base here. I'm actually going to raise this up on some dimensionals because I think that just adds quite a lot to the way it sits. So I'm going to use some of the edge pieces. You've seen me do this before, I'm sure. I do hope you don't throw away these sheets when you've used all the dimensionals, because those edge pieces are so useful for something like this, where you're putting something quite large, kind of 3Ding it, and you want a lot of individual dimensionals to do that. But if you've got the strips, they cover a lot of ground. We do of course also have the foam adhesive strips. They're in the annual catalogue with all the other adhesives, and they are fantastic. I use them a lot for shaker cards. but they are a little bit deeper than these. They work brilliantly, but if you're sending something through the post, you can find that you end up having to pay for a large letter, whereas as long as you haven't got a lot of other dimensional things on your card, then one layer of standard dimensionals doesn't make your card so thick that you have to pay the extra postage. Now, obviously, I'm in the UK. If you're watching this from somewhere else, I don't know how your postal system works, but hopefully it's the same. So I tend not to use the foam adhesive strips unless I'm using a shaker card, when that's going to be pretty dimensional anyway, and I'm likely to have to pay the extra in any case. Now, I've put the foam adhesive all over the back of this card because what I don't want is for the middle of it to sag, because that completely spoils the effect. However, it does take me a moment to get all the backing off. Right, I'll attempt to get these in my bin. They'll probably end up all over the floor. Yes, as predicted. Never mind, you can't see my floor, which is just as well because it's a disgrace. There we are. I'll just try and turn that side because I don't know if you can see or not. I really like the dimension on this. So that is my card front. Now I'm just going to add a little message to it just here, and I really like that just because, as I said, it's a really useful sentiment. So I'm just going to find that, which is buried somewhere on my desk. Here it is. I'm going to use my Starry Sky ink and stamp this sentiment strip, which I've cut. I think it's 3/8 of an inch wide, which is right for this sentiment, but if you're using something different, you're obviously going to cut it to suit that. That is really crooked, so let's try again. I'm trying not to get my head under the camera, but this time I'm just going to go for it. So I'm sorry if you're looking at my parting. That's better. And then I'm just going to cut that to size. And I'm going to stick that one flat. It also looks nice up on dimensionals. I've got another version of this to show you in a moment in different colours, and on that one I've put this up on dimensionals, but that would definitely push it into the large letter postage. And then the insert, all I'm going to do is just add a couple of those birds to this. A little bird stamp like this is so useful. Apart from anything else, if you get an inky smudge from your finger and it transfers to your card, very often a small bird stamp will hide it. So I'm not going to put anything else in here because if I'm sending a just because card, I probably want to write a bit more than usual inside. There we are. So that's my finished card. Trying to keep it in shot, which I'm not very good at. There we are. And then I've got another one here which I did in some different colours. It's the same. I used my Stamparatus set up exactly the same, and so the design is the same. The only difference is that I popped this up on dimensionals as well, and I've used vanilla card to stamp on instead of white. My colours for this are early espresso, sweet sorbet and pale papaya. So I'm just going to slide these back in here, out of the way. You can't see, but I've got my ink storage over to my left. Clear the decks a little bit, and I need to clean the stamps as well. So let me just show you how I do that. So I bring back my Stamparatus. So this is one of the Simply chamois. These are in the annual catalogue. They're great for cleaning your stamps. You just moisten them with water. They do stain. You can see this is very stained, but you just rinse them under the tap to get them clean, or you can even pop them in the washing machine on a 40-degree wash. So if I don't want to take my stamps off here and use my stamping scrub, what I can do instead is just use a piece of the chamois, and because I've cut it up, I've cut the whole chamois into 6, I can actually get around the stamps on here very easily and clean the plates. And then I just keep them in one of the stamp boxes, which helps keep them moist. There, so I hope you can see that it's taking the ink off the plate. As well as cleaning the stamp. This piece is a little bit dry actually. Let me get another one out. That feels better. So this Stamparatus stamping tool, you can do a lot of very clever techniques on it. You can stamp wreaths and mirror images and all sorts of things on it, but it's also absolutely brilliant for multiples if you want to stamp lots of something, because you set it up once and then you just quickly stamp and your placement is sorted. You don't have to think about getting the stamp in the right place. You just flip the plate over. And it's also very good for large stamps, which can be very difficult to hold. And if you've got hands like mine that are a bit arthritic, a bit sore, then it's much easier to handle than a stamping block, particularly if you're having a bad day and your hands are complaining. So there's lots of good reasons for using a Stamparatus. So I'm just going to clean off these other 2 stamps with my scrub. Okay, let's put those to one side, ready for in a minute, or in a minute when we get to the end I should say. And let's bring in another project. Just found a note in my basket of bits reminding me to, to turn on my phone charger so everything doesn't go suddenly black. So I've done that. I promised actually, didn't I, to give you the measurements for that card. Here, there we are. So let me put the card next to it, then they'll make sense. So my card base was 8 inches by 5 3/4 inches, scored at 4 inches. That's my standard A4, my standard card base, and you can get 2 of those out of a piece of A4 card. Then my top layer, which is this outer Starry Sky frame, was a piece of card 5.5 by 3 3/4, and I used the 3rd largest stitched rectangles die to cut that into a frame. Then my underlayer, which is the turquoise one, the Tahitian Tide layer, that started out at 5 3/8 by 3 5/8. In other words, it's just a little bit smaller than the one going above it, just so that the edges of it will come inside the edges of this top piece, because you don't want the Tahitian Tide poking out the sides. And then I cut that aperture with the next smallest die, which is the 4th largest die. And then my stamped layer was 3/4 inch by 5 1/4 inches, and then I just trimmed a little bit off the top just to make sure that it fitted in the frame without any of the white poking out. So my next card, I've actually got the same colour scheme I showed you, which is early espresso, pale papaya and sweet sorbet. Sweet sorbet is not a colour I use an awful lot, but I am using it on this. Again, I'll give you the measurements at the end. Some bits and pieces here. And I've also got a kind of a, here's one I prepared earlier. So let me lift that up. Red paper's moved a little bit. Let's put that back in the corner. Actually, I'll make sure the mat, yeah, that's back in the corner. So I want everything in this top corner. So this stamp here, which is this image, I stamped onto some card and I've actually fussy cut it out. I stamped it in early espresso ink and then I cut it out. Now, I realise if you hate fussy cutting, you'll be throwing up your hands in horror. But if you like fussy cutting, then it's okay to do. And even if you don't, you might decide it's worth it just for the rest of the card. So you'd seen me cut out before. I didn't think you needed to see me cut that. So I've stamped and cut that out already. Let me just, oops, pop this back the other way. And I've got some vanilla card here. This time I'm going to pop it right up in the corner here to save me having to set up the Stamparatus again and again take time out of the crafting. I'm actually going to cut this down a little bit when I've finished. I've got some other pieces here. I'm just trying to move them out of the way and I'll talk you through those when we get to the measurements. Right, so a little bit of stamping now. So I've done my initial stamp and I've cut that out. Then I'm going to bring in my pale papaya ink. Actually, I need to move that magnet up to the top where it won't be in the way. And stamp on here. And yes, I'm going to do that one again. These stamps with a large area that is solid, often you get a really much better impression if you stamp them twice. There we go. And then I'm going to stamp my clouds in the background using sweet sorbet ink. And I'm actually not going to stamp the bit that fills in there. You'll see why in a minute. Stamp that one there, there we go. So that's my stamping done. Let's just move this out of the way. Put the lid on that or I'm bound to lean on it. Okay, so I'm going to trim this now. As I said, I didn't trim it to the right size because then I'd have had to set up the Stamparatus for a different size piece of card. So it was easiest to stamp this the same and then trim it afterwards. So I'm going to just trim this to 3 inches wide. As I say, I'll give you the measurements in a minute. And 3 3/4 of an inch deep. Check with my cutout. I've written myself a note with the sizes and just making sure that I can understand what I'm talking about. No, I'm actually going to cut some off there first. There we go. And then I'm going to cut it to 3 3/4. There we go. So my stamp piece now is 3 inches by 3 3/4 of an inch. It actually would have been much easier if I'd reset up the Stamparatus because I wouldn't have then had to stamp it and trim it. but it just takes a few minutes, which I didn't want to take when I was halfway through showing you something. All right, so I have here a piece of pale papaya card. I'm hoping you can see that. I've embossed it using the Fern embossing folder, which I really like, and I had here to show you, but I must have buried it. I don't know what I've done with that. I definitely had it here. I just took just took it out of the basket. No, it's gone. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay, which is let's put something dark underneath it so you can see some of that pattern. There we are. That's probably easier to see than on the embossed piece. I love that embossing folder. And I've got some early espresso card. So I'm going to put that piece on there, but first I'm going to add this on here. And I'm going to use my mini Stampin' Dimensionals to pop that on there. So instead of it just being stamped on top, it's actually going to be a little bit raised up and add not just visual dimension, but actual dimension to my project. So these are the mini Stampin' Dimensionals mostly that I'm using, because it's quite a mini cutout. I've even got some little pieces here I've cut in half. So this is definitely a more fiddly card. Personally, I think it's worth it. But I guess it depends how fiddly you like to go. So I'm just fitting as many of these on as I can to try and support as much of that cutout as possible. I feel like I need another little piece there. Let's just cut a narrow little piece off the edge. Give me a little rectangle. There we go. Hopefully you can see all those pieces on there. So it doesn't look pretty from the back, but we're not going to see the back. I said it was fiddly, didn't I? There we go. Half a mini dimensional is not very much to work with when you're trying to take the back off it, but I'm nearly there. And the rest of this will go much quicker. Almost there. This is the last little piece. There we go. Thank you for waiting so patiently. All right, so now I'm just going to lay this along the bottom. There we are. And then layer this onto there. Then this is going to go onto my embossed piece, and I picked the Fern folder because I thought this is kind of a landscape, even if it's a stylized one. So the ferns seemed to kind of work quite well, even though I've covered most of them up. insert. I was going to put it to the side and then I thought I'm going to lose it on this desk. There is so much stuff on this desk. Okay. And then I am once again going to use some dimensionals on the back of this. All my edge strips on that other card, didn't I? Okay, but these bigger ones are much quicker to actually take the backing paper off. I think that's all of them. And then I have another strip of that fern embossed card here, and another piece of the espresso, and some more vanilla. So I'm going to stamp on that vanilla card. And I'm going to use that just because, again, it's such a useful stamp. And I think this set is perfect for all kinds of occasions. I think it works really well for masculine cards. And those of us who are girls know that that can be quite tricky to come up with sometimes, or at least I find them quite tricky. I think it makes a really nice sympathy card. Nobody wants to have to make a sympathy card, but I certainly have had to make quite a few of those over the last few years. And actually I realise I've been talking and I'm not concentrating on what I'm doing. So let me use my other piece. I actually don't want lovely for birthday cards, great for men, and definitely good because of just because cards. Not doing well today, am I? I've messed that one up as well. Right. Did you spot me use the emergency side? There we are. Third time lucky. Okay, so I'm now going to just stick these layers together. Don't tell anyone that I messed up the stamping on the back of this because they can't tell. I've also put too much glue on that. I was distracted. I hope you didn't hear. I've got my phone on silent, but actually somebody was trying to call me, and it's the garage. My husband's car's in the garage today, and they've presumably tried to ring him and failed, so they're now ringing me. Well, I can't help them anyway because I won't be able to answer whatever question they're asking. So I was trying to ignore it buzzing at me. I hope you couldn't hear it, and making instead a bit of a pig's ear of what I was supposed to be doing. Okay, so I'm going to raise these up on some dimensionals as well. And just add this down at the bottom, and then I will do the insert and then I'll give you the measurements. I haven't put any birds on this. I'm just wondering whether to or not. I had planned to put some birds on this. I think I will. So take a deep breath, because you should always do your stamping before you stick everything together, because if I mess this up, I've messed up the whole card, but thankfully that risk paid off. Okay, so once again, it's a just because card, so I'm just going to stamp some birds on this. We'll stamp an extra one. I hold my stamp so that one is on the card and one is off. then I can get 3 birds. Even though there's only 2 on the stamp. Okay, so pop this inside and then card number 2 is done. Ooh, that's too long, isn't it? That is too long. So let's see what we've got here. I've got another piece of cream here. This is probably a little bit small. Oh, but that will work. Okay, let's stamp the birds again. Don't know what that piece of card was for. It was probably a random offcut left from when I cut these pieces, and I just ended up popping it in my kit and not realising that it was the wrong size. There we are. So this is a little bit smaller than I usually do, but that's perfectly fine. So here then is the card with the piece which I stamped and cut out and then put on top in a 3D fashion rather than stamping it flat on the card. And sometimes for a change it's quite fun to kind of separate the focal image and the sentiment like that and put them on different strips. So I will give you the measurements for those in case that's something you want to try. So my card base was 8 inches by 5 3/4. That's the same as the previous one, scored at 4 inches. So the embossed layers, the top one is 3 3/4 inch by 4 1/2 inches. And this one at the bottom is 3 3/4 inch by 7/8 inch. Then my contrast layer, that's the early espresso, the dark brown. This one is 3 1/4 by 4 inches, and this one is 3 1/4 by 5/8 inch. And then my stamped layer is actually 3 inches by 3 3/4 inch. I started off with a bigger piece and then trimmed it down. My bigger piece was 3 1/2 inches by 5 1/4, but I would have typically started with the right size card and then stamped it. And then my insert should have been 3 3/4 inch by 5 1/2 inches. So let me leave that there just while I clean a couple of stamps and clear up some of this debris. I've got dimensional backings everywhere. Shush those all into the bin. I'm going to clean my stamps. And clean my Stamparatus as well. Clean that one. I didn't use that one. That was the one I cut out. You can see the stamps have stained. Which is fine. It's actually much better that once they stain, because if you put them on your desk you can find them again. When they're a clear stamp they're very, very difficult to find, and they tend to stick themselves onto things like a stamp case or something like that. So I'm always quite pleased when they get stained. All photopolymer stamps stain, you can't stop it, it's not a fault or anything. But it can be quite handy. rid of those ink pads. And I'm just going to grab a stamp set off my shelf because I've forgotten that as well. The wonderful go-to greetings. Let me find the one I want. If you haven't got this stamp set, it is the most fantastic one for sentiments. You've got happy birthday, thinking of you, and thank you. And just a note in 3 different sizes, 3 different fonts, and then you also have this little hello. I'm just going to check that I have that straight. Alright, so I'll be using the happy birthday on a block, but then I'll be using the Stamparatus for other things. So once again, I will give you the measurements at the end. Talk you through those other bits and pieces as well in a minute. So again, to save me having to set up my Stamparatus again, I'm just checking the sizes of my card that I'm stamping with. Yeah, that's the one I want. I'm actually going to start off with something bigger than I need and cut it down, just to save me having to set this up all over again, although I will, when we get to the end, show you how I set the stamps up. Right, just get my paper in the right place, get my mat in the right place. Okay, so this time I'm going to pop that right in the corner. Put my 2 plates on. All right, so I'm going to start out with garden green ink. And I'm going to stamp that foreground image with the trees. And I'm just going to do that again. I think I need to have a re-inking session on my ink pads. There we are. Then I'm going to turn it round and use soft seafoam ink for these little, I don't know if they're trees, bushes, vegetation. It can be whatever you want them to be. Down here. And I'm actually going to ink that one a second time as well, just to get really full coverage. And this is a very pale ink when it dries. Get a really nice intense colour on that. And then I'm going to miss out the next stamp, if you like, the next stamp in the sequence, and just do this one. Am I going to do that? No, I'm not actually. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to move it. So let me find. I'm just going to clean that so I don't get too inky. Okay, and I actually want it a little bit higher up. Let's pop it. Pop it about there. So I'm going to pick it up on the plate. So you're getting a quick sneak peek. There we are. I think I like that better. All right, so that's my stamping done on this, except for some birds. I'm first of all going to cut this to the size I want, which is 3.5 by 3 and 5/8. Oops, and I've got a finished one here, but I didn't want to show you until I'd done the stamping. So I'm just, yeah. So 3.5 is my vertical measurement here, or my measurement across there, if you like. Not vertical, that's horizontal. There we go. So I want that to be 3.5, and I want my borders to be as even as I can either side. Let's just take a fraction more off here. There we are. And I'm going to take just a little bit off the bottom, so that white at the bottom is even with the sides, and then I'm going to take the rest off here. So this needs to be 3 5/8 of an inch. There we are. And as I say, if I had reset up the Stamparatus for this particular card, I wouldn't have had to trim that. It would have all been in exactly the right place on the right sized piece of card. So it's a time saving thing really, which is why I've been trimming it. There we go. So I'm going to mount this on some garden green card. And I've pulled in some bits and pieces from the Enjoy Your Journey suite, which I showed you, was it last week? No, possibly the week before. So let me show you that now. I have a piece of this paper with the pine trees on it, which I thought worked really well with the trees on this. And I've got a card base, so that the card front and the paper are exactly the right size to fit. And again, I'll give you a measurement sheet at the end for this one. There we are, so that's covered the whole card front with paper, which isn't something I very often do, but I've enjoyed doing it on this. Now I'm going to pop this on the front with some dimensionals. And I've got some twine here, which I had actually planned to tie around the paper, and I've just glued the paper down, so let's do something else instead with that. The twine is from the same suite. You get a pack with 3 colours in this: Coastal Cabana, Pumpkin Pie and this Garden Green. So you've got a turquoise and orange and a dark green twine. And you can split it down if you want fewer ply twine than it comes. You can sort of pull it apart, which is another option. In the middle. I'm going to stamp that happy birthday on here using Garden Green ink. So let's shut that one up. On here somewhere, and before I decide exactly where, I've got one of these embellishments. These are also from the Enjoy the Journey suite. They've got the look of enamel. They're an acrylic embellishment. And one of the things you can do with them is colour them using a Stampin' Blends marker. So rather than have my white, I want it to be a pale green. So this is actually my light old olive marker. And because these are alcohol ink markers, once they dry, that ink is permanent, so it's not going to rub off here. So I'm going to put this on here, somewhere like that. But I was just looking to see if I can do something else with the twine. I may not, I might just leave the twine off this one. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it off. I don't want to tie it around there because it puts the balance off. But I will show you one with the twine on in just a moment. Right, so let's snip a little bit off the end of here. And then I'm going to snip some off the other end, but I just need to get this in the right place and decide how much I need to cut off. So about here. I want the end of this hidden underneath that embellishment. So again, I know this is upside down, it doesn't matter for the moment. I'm just kind of, just offering that up and getting my placement. So it looks right to me. There is no right or wrong with this kind of thing. Just trust your judgment. And then I'm just going to pop that embellishment on there. So that green ink I put on that little circle with the pine trees is dry now. So that is my card front. And then my insert, I'm going to add those birds again. I haven't put birds on the front of this. I was very tempted to, but I decided to leave them off. And instead add them to the inside, along with a happy birthday. I get a little bit stamp happy when I've got one of those bird stamps. I just want to stamp it all over everywhere. Is that just me? I know sometimes more is more, but I think you need to be sensible with your bird stamps. Okay, pop that in here, and then this card is finished. And then I'll show you another one where I didn't forget to add the twine. And this one I did add birds to, so we've got a couple of different versions there. And this paper was cut from the top of this section, so these were like that, which is why it is paler, because this particular piece of paper design has like an ombre effect on it. There we are. So that's those two. Now, just before I finish, I promised you that I would show you how to set up the Stamparatus for stamping. So let me bring it back. Clean off the ink, and I'm just going to pull these stamps off. I'm going to stick them over there on my scrub so I don't lose them. So I'm going to first of all, let's turn that over so there's a clean bit to look at. Got my grid paper down. Let's pull in these other stamps. So you just need to think of these plates as a stamp block. they go in and out of these kind of hinge sections, and they're interchangeable, so you can put one that side or you can put it that side, and you can turn them round as well. The only thing to remember is when you put them in vertically, take them out vertically. Once they're in, you can go like that, but if you try to put them in or take them out on the skew, you can actually break these plastic pieces off, and you definitely don't want to be doing that. Right, so if I was going to stamp, I would put my card in here. I usually put it right in that top corner because then it's very easy to relocate it if it moves. However, as you saw earlier, you can decide to place it somewhere else. It depends on your design, it depends on your stamps. And if I'm going to place it somewhere other than that top corner, I usually put some marks on my grid paper, and you saw I had a pink line there earlier when that's exactly what I was doing. So the first thing I would do is lay this down. Let's say I want it right down at the bottom like that. So the actual image side is down. This is the flat side here that sticks to the block. And then instead of sticking it to a block, I'm just going to press the plate down onto it and it will pick it up. I haven't cleaned it very well, as you can see, but that's okay because this is just a for instance. And so now I can stamp that image. And if I want to stamp that again on another piece of card, I can just replace the card, ink it again, stamp it again, and I can keep doing that and keep doing that. Then for the second part of my image, which is this, actually no, let's do this one next. I think it's easier probably visually to do this one next. Maybe it's not. No, let's do this one next. There we go. So I'm just going to jigsaw this into the gaps. So we've got a gap here, and a gap here. So I'm going to jigsaw this in. And if you put your head directly over it, you will get the most accuracy. So again, I've got the image side down, I've got the flat side up. I've got a stamp on here, so I'm going to lift my plate out, turn it round, and use the other side to pick up that stamp. Okay, my card's moved because these stamps are really sticky, but that doesn't matter because I can relocate it back in that top corner. And now I can stamp my second image. And I know it's going to go in the right place. And if that's not dark enough, I can just re-ink it again, check my card's located in the right place, and stamp it again, and it will go down in exactly the same place as before. And then I repeat that with any other images I want to use. Now if I finish with these, I can either take these off and use this plate again, or I can use my other plate. So this one now jigsaws around these wiggly kind of treetops here. So once again, I get my head directly over, I know may not be great for you, but you do need to do this to actually see. There we are. And then again, I've got the flat side uppermost, the image side down. So I pick it up with the plate. Let's just pop my card back, and then let's just use I'm just going to grab Parakeet Party, which I probably wouldn't pick with this stamp, but it's a third green, just so that you can see the distinct image. Oops, wrong one. I just inked the wrong stamp. Let's ink the image that we wanted to stamp. There we are. And you'll see I've got my magnets down here, but they are the right size so that they don't impinge this plate moving. There we go, so that's the next one, and then finally I can lift this out, turn it round, and use the other side for my fourth image, which is here. So I can put this wherever I want. If I want it to be clouds, it can go up there, or it can go down here just on top of the landscape. Let's have it down there. Pick it up with the plate, check my card alignment, and then ink it and stamp it. And there is my scene, and I could repeat that process with new card, every time. It doesn't matter which order I stamp these in, they'll all fit together. As long as that card is in the same place it was in before, then these, ooh, didn't stamp that very well, didn't ink it properly. Let's try that again. You see I get a second go because I've got it on the Stamparatus. I can complete that incomplete image. Let's turn it round. I can't remember what colour I used for that. Was that the Parakeet Party one? Yes, it was. So I'm stamping these in reverse order now, and they will still go back in the right place. And you can hopefully see how quick this is. Because they're all located in the right place, it's just a case of inking and stamping. As long as every time I make sure that my card is located where I had set it up in the first place, which for me is usually that top right hand corner, then you can stamp really quickly. So an image like this that takes a little while to build up, you can actually set up your Stamparatus and then stamp quite quickly once you've set it up. So it's definitely worth doing for multiples, or for anything that's just a little bit tricky to set up. All right, I'm going to close these up, move things so there's a little bit of space, and then bring in everything we've made this afternoon, because I have gone a little bit longer than I usually do on a Friday. There we go. So that's the 3 cards I've made this afternoon, all using the Picturesque stamp set, which I really like. There's lots of ways you can use it with cutting out and dimension and combining it with other sets, your outdoors sets, your nature sets, your plant life sets. It'll work for all kinds of occasions. It's a lovely set. I really like it, and it is a bit different. As I say, it calls to mind for me those vintage travel images. I'm going to cover you over, bring you back up and say goodbye, because, as I say, time is going on this afternoon. There we go. So hopefully, yes, that's not too bad there. Ooh, a little bit of a tilt. Let's give it a bit of a tilt. You've been very quiet. I haven't had any questions. Thank you, Kay. I'm glad you like them. So maybe I've tempted you to go and have a look at that and see it with different eyes. It is a different kind of stamp set, but it works just like all the other stamps. You just choose your colours and put your images together. If you've got a Stamparatus, it makes life very, very easy. But if you haven't, just use your clear blocks, take your time, and just hover your head over the top and make sure everything's lined up properly. Just as I showed you when I was lining up the stamps for the Stamparatus, it's exactly the same if you're stamping them from blocks. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back here next Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I'll be looking at the In the Country stamp set and showing you a few ideas for techniques that you can use with that. So it'll be a little bit more technique-y next week, and I hope you'll be able to come and join me then. Have a really lovely weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.